everyone. Yes. Yeah, welcome everyone, and thank you, Lisa, for your kind introduction. I will just try to fix our presentation first. So sorry for a bit of tap. Yes. Is it working well?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so yes, hello everyone, and as Alisa already mentioned, today I'm happy to be joined with Andrei, my co-worker and co-initiator of Trajna collective, with whom, yes, we have started Trajna in 2017. So it's actually 2 days now. 2 days ago, we have been celebrating our 5th anniversary since we started. And what we usually do to celebrate our work is that we gather in this feral landscape quite close to the city center of Ljubljana, completely overgrown with Japanese knotweed, because the landlord of the site somehow doesn't often visit this really particular space, urban space. And we gather the dry stems of Japanese knotweed because they're like, this is the perfect time for harvesting the biomass, which we use to produce knotweed paper, our innovative and sustainable paper alternative, about which we will be speaking today as well. So what we wanted to do with this talk is basically to, at the beginning, try to present you a short framework, or maybe like some sort of thinking that we apply towards or to our practice, and then hopefully present you our most interesting or attractive projects that we have been working on so far. So yes, I will begin. So what really made us interested in invasive plants was actually the fact that we didn't believe that their eradication is an effective approach for bringing back healthy ecosystems. And we really started to understand that the current paradigm fails to recognize the core problem to the spread of invasive species, which lies in the environmental and social effects of destruction of natural habitats, as we have been, I think, hearing about in many previous presentations in the series. So these urbanized, deforested and polluted landscapes are becoming homes to novel ecosystems represented by invasive and maybe other feral plants. So the deliberate removal prevents these vital species and resilient species to start the work of repair and create new opportunities for local communities. So this warlike paradigm that shapes the way we approach the spread of invasive species led us to question the current management strategies, as well as hate speech, which became an integral part of the way our Western societies talk and interact with these globally spread beings. So because of the pejorative connotation of its invasiveness and its consequences, we have decided to use the term feral when we speak about the plants instead. So this rewording for us functions as a practice of alignment with the narrative of non-native plants, which were previously praised and of high value, yet currently considered as unwanted and weedy. Their path of evolution also inspires us to let go of the normative roles of design practice today, and instead, just as plants do, kind of go wild, to reinvent ways in which we cultivate our worlds and our thoughts. So if we, as designers and makers and generally creatives, wanted to move from supporting the system of extractive economies to fostering healthy ecosystems, we needed to invent new practices of care for the landscapes from which we're taking the gifts of nature. So as Catriona Sandilands really beautifully puts, we kind of felt the urge to collectively embark on the project of environmental regeneration, meaning that harvesting plants is just one of the activities in which we take into account the needs of ecosystems, as ecosystems take care of our needs. So by understanding invasive plants or feral plants as companion species of the Anthropocene, we could better understand how and with whom to collaborate to build a diverse web of life in our damaged ecosystems. Instead of working towards their eradication, we decided to invite people to recognize the opportunities invasive plants bring to our local communities.
Hello. I'll talk now about our first project with Gaia. It was also the first Trajna, the first project under Trajna, where we met after a long time working again together. And we were, maybe first the name, it was called Invasive. We were thinking about joining our forces in this new dynamic, really dynamic world, and where the humans are shaping our geological force and are shaping Earth processes, and in a bad way. So we were imagining, and we wanted to work on Trajna to have an ideal which would be a symbiocene where humans and non-human beings would collaborate, would establish relations that would feed each other. And this was our first project, which I still really like. I think we found a really good solution to talk to people in a like safe environment where people could positively look at this problematic of invasive plants. And we did it in a way that we decided to work with a woody invasive plant called the Tree of Heaven, which is a beautiful tree. Here you can see in the photo there a family of those trees, and we decided to connect it with another symbol in Slovenia. It's a really loved symbol. It's the Carniola bee. So beekeeping is one of the national hobbies in Slovenia, and we connected to two elements. One that is perceived in public as a threat to biodiversity, and the other one, the bee, which is one that helps the biodiversity in a certain area. So we decided to merge them. So we made beehives from the wood of Tree of Heaven, and we hosted for a season for families of bees. It's there's a question. Yes, those trees above the beehives are trees of heaven. Also, the young sprouts below are trees of heaven. So this was in the park in front of the Museum of Architecture and Design in Ljubljana. And the same museum also gave us a production space where we decided to activate the space as a space where we can invite permaculturists, artists working with invasive plants, beekeepers, urban beekeepers, to share their stories, to share their experience with invasive plants, and create a space of exchange. And it was really amazing how we managed to invite people, and how the people responded to our questioning this main and the media that were presenting the invasive plants as a negative thing at that time in Slovenia. So yeah, maybe Gaia, if you go to the next slide, we also soon, when we were working with bees, we soon realized that also beekeepers are one of the transport elements that are working in our area, because beekeepers brought a lot of plants from other continents to Europe and also to Slovenia, plants that to give food to the bees. And invasive plants are the one in the photo, for example, are Japanese knotweed and the goldenrod, are really important for bees, because it's the last natural food they get at the end of the summer, when they're storing all the food to survive through the winter. So we could really talk to people and question the negativity of invasive plants in our ecosystems. That's why I really like this project. I think it was a really good first project we did with Gaia. And from that project, we then got involved in actually a huge European project. We're together with the municipality of Ljubljana, the main waste management company of Ljubljana, and various research institutes. We were joining in this Applause project, where we addressed the problematic of invasive plant species in terms of zero waste approach and circular economy on a city level. So it was a much bigger project than the first one. Trajna here was developing prototypes from wood and paper, and was leading also educational workshops for schools and students. Here in the photos are some products, wood products that we did during the project. And we developed a series of furniture, DIY furniture, that is designed primarily to encourage self-organization, creativity, and self-provisioning of local communities. Such furniture can prompt a series of different activities. For example, initiate public workshops, help set up community spaces. We can teach children how to handle these first approaches to woodworking. And it's also helpful to identify woody invasive plants. While we were doing and designing those woody products, we soon realized that there is a bigger problematic when sourcing this wood in this urban context, as trees have a really important function in cities, because they give shelter to other animals, they give shade, they cool down areas, they help store water and also store carbon. So this was a really, also this communication with the municipality and the waste management company was really about also realizing that maybe here we must really think about what is this source. So at the end in the project, we only used trees. Some trees were cut down, but only those that were having a serious disease, or those who were a threat to the public. So this is, we did a series of furniture, we did also a birdhouse with a green roof, and yeah, this is one of the projects we did during this European project.
Okay, so Andrei was more kind of looking into the possibilities of the wood products, as kind of my role was more dedicated towards finding new applications for the use of paper, so to create and to design a series of paper products, and one of which that I find kind of the most interesting was the collection of traveling plants, because it gave us an opportunity to dive deeper into the history of botanical migration. We have done this project during the residency program of Augusto Foundation in Prague, Czech Republic. And we really wanted to design an object which would help us to speak about the root problem in regards to invasive species, which is well hidden in colonial approaches to people and the land. So we have kind of managed to develop a creative method to introduce historical narratives of species invasion presented in a form of a graphic herbarium that you can see on the left image of the slide. We chose, why did we chose to work with herbaria? It was like a very deliberate decision to do that. And it was because they were widely used by botanists and explorers during the period of colonization to assemble a collection of exotic species taken from the newly conquered areas, lands, and then later introduced in the botanical gardens to European residents. So these collections of pressed plants fixed to the white sheets of paper allowed people to look at exotic green beings, or as plants, as mere objects of scientific observation and visual admiration. So somehow the plants were completely decontextualized and moved away, displaced from their local environments, and then suddenly placed on this white sheet of paper, losing the whole kind of story that made them kind of the living beings in the ecosystems where they were found. So on the contrary, our graphic drawings printed on handmade Japanese knotweed paper fill out this empty space that I was talking about just before, and like fill it with the ethnobotanical stories of 5 imported plant species today considered to be invasive. So we have been working with an illustrator, Kaja Albarszek, and she was drawing these amazing illustrations on the basis of ethnobotanical research that I have made in Prague. Sort of really like going back from the times of going back to the times of 15th, 16th, and 17th century, and then trying to showcase how the plants moved through the continents, arrived to Europe. Usually, they were exhibited in botanical gardens, and then they were like being completely promoted as exotics or as like useful and really beautiful plants. And further on, of course, they were running away from the gardens, running away from the public parks and cultivated areas, finding their way in the nature, in the wilderness, and then being suddenly considered as unwanted and invasive. So they all share the same kind of story, but with a bit of different details. So we use the invasive herbaria to kind of introduce people to those stories. And how we did it is that we organized a series of workshops across Europe on which we speak about these narratives and try to kind of show people, kind of teach people to recognize the plants and to engage in this creation of their own graphic plant assemblages. The graphic sheets of the herbarium are inserted into a wooden press that I think was also made from the wood of the tree of heaven, similar to one that botanists use to make their own herbarias. So basically you can also use the product to press the plants, which is quite handy when you're traveling around. And then, as I already mentioned, they're made on the handmade paper from Japanese knotweed, and they're screen printed. Yes, so I think like there was a really nice quote that I found in this article from Tomasz Mastnak called Botanical Decolonization. Really a cool article. I recommend you to kind of browse deeper into. And he was saying that once we see colonialism as the literal planting and displanting of peoples, animals, and plants, as inscribing domination into blood and soil founded in the fantasy of molding ecosystems with godlike arrogance, it becomes clear how colonialism ushered into the Anthropocene. So yeah, this moves us forward. Kind of, we're thinking if we want to pay back the damage of ecological imperialism, we need to engage in framing new local and regenerative economies which support not only the well-being of people, but also of our land. So with Trajna, we have started a few years ago, knotweed paper project, as a complementary business activity in a wish to support our creative activities and also offer our ecological driven alliances a sustainable paper alternative, which is produced by the community locally and with care. So instead of using precious trees, the brand uses locally foraged Japanese knotweed as its source material and thus brings the paradigm of the modern paper industry into question. Looking at its environmental impact, the paper industry is currently considered as extremely problematic. And there is just like a very crazy fact that the tree plantations have expanded by 50% in the last 30 years, which means that they are greatly increasing the threats to terrestrial biodiversity. So the kind of natural forest have been cut down and replanted with those monocultures that usually are being also cultivated with the help of herbicides. So yeah, this is why we believe that the work that we do with knotweed paper is really important. And what is kind of interesting about it is also the fact that we work with older paper machines, which means that we produce always a little bit and slightly different paper, different in shape, different in quality. We never know what we will get out from the machine. And why we find this interesting is because this kind of unpredictability cracks the logic of efficiency and standardization and gives space for diversity, experimentation and surprise, which sometimes, of course, it's wonderful, sometimes is less wonderful, but the paper really asks us to look for partners like printers, printmakers and designers who know how to recognize such deviations as an advantage and like to take the time to experiment with the very potentials of the material. All the surplus created from selling the paper is currently invested to further develop the brand and hopefully in the future to support non-commercial and voluntary activities of our cultural association. So paper, its story and its unique characteristics has also become a tool for creating new alliances in Slovenia and abroad. And I think paper was also a tool or a product that connected me and Alisa to start up this series of talks. So we've met through knotweed paper. At the beginning of this year, for example, we have also launched a series of paper samples, which are presented on the image, introducing the work of our dear friends and colleagues. let me just present what we have here. On the bottom right, we have Pedro Yervel, an architect reinventing vernacular architecture in Portugal. And then on the left, we have an illustration from Amy Rice, who also contributed with her illustration to this series. And then we have on the left top, we have Roku Black, our friend and product designer interested in experimenting with wild clay. And then lastly, we also have a postcard from Crater Creative Community, which will be now introduced further by Andrei.
Yeah, so the last few years we were spending most of our time on this abandoned construction pit that you see in the photo. And this is actually the materialization of our interest and work on the ongoing Symptom project. During our work with invasive plants, we soon realized only harvesting them is not the solution. Neither are they the problem. They are the consequence of inappropriate human understanding and activity in ecosystems. So, as a consequence, we wanted to establish a permanent activity of care on a degraded area populated with invasive plants in Ljubljana. When we started to shape this idea and project, we teamed up with Prostoroj Association, which is an architectural bureau here in Ljubljana, but working also around Europe, who is working mainly with public space and public interventions and public regeneration. And with the Slovene Permaculture Association. So we wanted to have this public space knowledge, permaculture knowledge, and our design ecology knowledge merged into one project working on one location and do our activity there. So we wrote this project and actually got funded 6 months later, which forced us to, actually we didn't, at that time when we got the grant, we still didn't know where we were going to have this project. So then we had an intense location scouting for 6 months. And at the end, actually we didn't find any, like, a piece of land that really was, or because of the ownership, or because of the land, or in terms of how near is the city center, it wasn't the best choice. And at that time, we saw an article in an architectural newspaper about this abandoned construction pit, underlining the thriving nature on the ruins of Slovene construction dreams. So we went to check this abandoned construction pit, and we fall in love with it. So there were invasive plants everywhere. And this space was fenced for 30 years, and it was just something really independent, like independent nature in really few minutes from the city center of Ljubljana. So we got in connection. We connected with the owner, which is the Ministry of Justice of Slovenia, and an amazing thing happened on the first meeting. We went there to present our project, and at the end of the meeting, we already got the keys of the construction pit, and in like 1 month, the contract with the Ministry of Justice was already done, and we could start our work on this construction pit.
Shall I move on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so to say a few words about the site and its history before we start our interventions. So it has been 26 years since the demolition of the Austrian-Hungarian artillery barracks that were previously standing on the site. And because there was no consensus reached at the governmental level, the level crater area remained vacant and fenced since then. So from the moment of demolition until we started to work on the site, there were only two greater interventions that happened on the site. One was the excavation of the gravel, which created two big craters, one of which you can see on the right below photo. And yeah, so two craters, excavated gravel used for building the neighboring residential area, Bežigradski Dvor, a really great quality gravel. And then the second intervention was the mowing of all shrubby weeds, which happened, I think, in 2017. So it's only like 5 years that, let's say that no management strategies were applied on the site. So everything that has regrown since then was the work of nature, which was like just fascinating because it was so green when we entered into the site. So this created conditions of the emergence of a really unique and hidden and overlooked and completely undervalued ecosystem in the middle of the city. And what's special about it is that kind of the spontaneous wildlife that is present on the site is more diverse than that of cultivated and preserved landscapes in Ljubljana. So this sort of untamed spaces where human interventions has ceased and nature has taken over can be also called third landscape. It's just like a very useful term we like to sometimes apply. So landscapes which are kind of spontaneously sprouting and are a consequence of human actions, but then of course also of reclaiming that has been done by nature. The term has been developed by very wonderful botanist and theoretician Gilles Clément. I really suggest, if you don't know him yet, to look into his work. Yeah, I pass you the word here.
Yeah, so when we got the contract with the Ministry of Justice, we first had a period of analyzing the space, see how we can work on that space. Our project, the content of our project was the infrastructure that we want to build upon was thought thoroughly in order to not to damage too much the ecosystem that was thriving there. So we decided to condense our activity on one quarter of the whole construction pit. And there we built 3 production units. One is a paper and cellulose workshop, one is a wood workshop, and one is biocomposites from mycelium laboratory, let's say. So these are the 3 main production units there. And so when we got there and we made the plan how this infrastructure and where it was going to be set upon, we started with weekly gatherings where we worked together with volunteers. So this was going on for a year, where in 1 year then we made the infrastructure. But the first action we did, we just want to get to know the neighbors from the residential buildings around crater. So on one meeting, they were complaining about this construction pit that the last years it's getting worse and worse. There are more and more mosquitoes. People are and junkies and are getting there, and the fence around the pit is getting uglier and uglier. And so there was a bit of discontent about this space, and we asked them if maybe we can do something about it, if we can maybe paint the fence that was looking at their bordering at their residential buildings, and they were happy about it. So we gathered with the Youth for Climate Justice and with working action, and we painted, I think, more than 100 meters of fence, and there was already a new and a better connection that we did with the neighbors. So until now, we were there for 2 years. There are only good comments coming from the neighboring side. Maybe we can go on, Gaia. So after 1 year, we set up the space, as I said, and we start with the public program. We made really a lot of events, myriad of events addressing extractivism, ecosystem regeneration, composting, more than human collaboration, and really various thematics were addressed here. But the first one, maybe Guy, you can go on with the slide. The first one was the summer school. We wanted to actually, as we were interested in production and sustainable production, we wanted to see actually what crater has, what can we work with when we are there. So we made a summer school where we were studying and researching the biomaterials that could be made on crater. So we made a material library. We invited Pedro Iervel from this architect guy I was talking about before, who is working with locally sourced materials in Portugal, building houses and furniture. So he was leading a workshop, a 3-day workshop. We were producing prototypes, hundreds of prototypes. Here on the, maybe just to mention two projects that were developed during the summer school. You can see on the photo on the right, on the upper side, there is an architect that was is also working in natural construction. She was making plaster with the first certification made of goldenrod, and from there, from crater, she sourced clay and gravel and made plaster out of it. So she made a natural plaster out of things found on the crater. Another one is on the photos below. Altan was who is working in a farm field on the borders of Ljubljana. They want to change the planting pots and the seeding trays which they use, because they are all of plastic, more or less, and they want to build, create, and design a trade. It's their own. So they did it from mycelium and again goldenrod biomass.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but something happened to the presentation. Yeah.
Maybe we don't see again. We don't see the photo. Yeah, it's again there.
Sorry.
There are just two of the projects done there. So there was various groups joined the workshop, and there was so we all together still remain in contact. There is a eco-social group now interacting with Crater, doing their activities on Crater for the last year. So it was a first action with the summer school, which sprouted a lot of new projects that were developed during the year then. Maybe Guy, you can continue.
Yeah, so I think it's the last project we would like to present tonight. And yeah, following this material research and having this really amazing opportunity to have our working station in such a diverse ecosystem, we really kind of wanted to start to look at plants beyond their material resourcefulness and introduce the site as a site of great biotic diversity, which can decrease urban heat islands, which can decrease noise, which is helping to cleanse the air. So kind of providing this myriad of ecosystemic services to the local residents and to the, of course, more than human residents as well. And here we also understand that invasive and other feral plants as pioneering plants started this amazing process of regeneration of the damaged Earth's crust, and they produce abundant amounts of biomass and seeds with which they create soil and attract other life forms to the site. So recognizing all of these crazy natural processes that are unfolding on the site, we really wanted to speak about this site and somehow to find ways to promote the value of such ecosystems, promote and as well somehow find ways to protect. So we got in touch with a really inventive practitioner from the Netherlands, from Rotterdam, Klaas Kuitenbrouwer, who is the motor behind the zoonomic movement, which enables organizations or collectives such as our community at Crater to represent the rights of nature as a holistic way of planning design interventions. So what I'm meaning by that is that as an organization, Crater became the so-called protozoop, and by becoming a protozoop, we're kind of dedicated now to protect the life on Crater with a very simple methodology that Klaas, together with his colleagues, developed, called zoonomic curriculum, and we're trying to employ it through planning and doing our design interventions. So one of the first design interventions that were connected to this methodology was to launch an open call, which is currently still open. So we have, together with an architect, Danica Sretenovic, kind of thought of this project called Feral Palace. And where through this project, we're kind of calling out architects, landscape architects and designers to think together with us how we can protect the rights of nature on Crater. But why do we want to do this right now? Is that because I think somewhere by the end of the summer, the owner of the plot, the Ministry of Justice, announced that the Palace of Justice So the new courthouse will be built on the same place that Krater is currently standing. And we really thought that this could be an interesting time to kind of build up on this idea of justice and try to kind of expand it towards thinking about multi-species justice for the site, but generally trying to introduce to Slovenia this terminology and this way of thinking, which is currently not present in the schools, creative schools or art schools, or in the practice at the moment. So what we did was, and we're still kind of doing that right now, is we organized 3 lectures with invited mentors. Deborah Solomon, just last week, she introduced us to the multi-species urbanism and public space lecture. And then Class, which I already mentioned, introduced us to the practice of zoonomy. And next Tuesday, yes, on 19th of April, we're hosting Ruk Krantz, who will be speaking about governing more than human transformations. After the talks will finish, also the selection process will finish. So we're having the applications the deadline on 22nd of April, so this month. And from then on, we will open up, we'll select the participants that are now applying from all over the world. And together with groups of designers and creatives who are now asked to be actually joined with biologists and lawyers and social scientists and other similar practices to work on their creative proposals together with the mentors, Debra, Klas, and Ruk, and hopefully trying to build some sort of alternative narratives to this Palace of Justice that is being planned to be built, and hopefully building the first palace for multi-species justice. Not build, but maybe speculate on the first palace of multi-species justice in the world. So yes, I think with this project, I would like to finish this talk and maybe, yeah, invite you if you have any questions. We're happy to answer.
That was so wonderful. Love all that. It's so sad that it's gonna go away. All those trees and it's just gonna be demolished. I mean, I'm kind of envisioning something with that, like how much loss there will be, and like some sort of grieving process or something. Yeah, that was really awesome.
So what we're trying to do actually now is to collect all the seeds that we are finding on the site, and also trying to kind of select the trees that might be then maybe like we will look into ways how to transplant them across Ljubljana. So we're kind of having certain strategies in mind, but of course we would like to think of Krater as a whole, not only as particular plants that might be saved or not. So yeah, you're right about the grieving process.
Yeah, or maybe a museum of, species post demolition or something. Or it's funny because it's like a demolition site already, and then there's going to be like demolition of this life that came after a demolition, and yeah, it's all very interesting. There was one question about the spraying, and I have a question about that too, but I just wanted to say that there are 2 resources that I would go to for that. She asked, do y'all have any experience convincing municipal and private entities to stop spraying? Yeah, and how we can quantify the economic cost of loss of pollinator populations. And I think 2 resources for that would be pesticide. It's called Pesticide Action Network, and then there's an organization called Beyond Pesticides. They might actually have and I can put the links in, but they probably have some stats on that. But But if either of you know of any designing or artistic endeavors that sort of talk about that.
Maybe what's really, we're really lucky in Slovenia that somehow the spraying was not so much a regular practice. So I think the municipality was not really allowed to spray. Yeah, so somehow we didn't look so much into these topics. Somehow, when we started with engaging with this topic, we were introduced by the municipality to these methods of cutting down the plants, for example, Japanese knotweed in the early spring, and then putting the foil, the black foil, over the land, and then doing that, repeating that over the course until I think the autumn, 3 times over the course of summer. But somehow we thought like, this is like really crazy. I don't know. So these are the methods that we applied when we began to work with the invasive plants. So yeah, maybe it's not so useful, but.
I was also wondering, were there any toxicity issues just on site as a military base? I mean, did you come across any of that?
Do you want to answer that?
Well, we were also a bit, yeah, we were thinking about this possibility of, let's say, of having the soil contaminated with some strange things or something. That's why we did the soil analysis, which didn't show any particular or worrying result. Yeah, it's actually, we also did the test for just to see how the level of air pollution could affect, because there is one of the main roads just on the other side of the fence. One of the main roads in Ljubljana that comes from the ring into the city center. And also from that perspective, there was no alarming result just when we were like testing the soil. I mean, there could be other things below Earth we didn't still find, but no, for now, no worrying.
Yeah, we were kind of really surprised that the tests were really good. So because we made the tests as we wanted to grow some vegetables from the soils. So we thought like, yes, of course, we want to build, how do you call it, Wysokie gredy, the raising beds. Yes, if this would be the case, but somehow the results were really good. So we felt quite safer, much safer afterwards.
Does anybody want to chime in with a question?
Yeah, hi. Maybe I have a question about Japanese knotweed specifically. So I was wondering, how does the harvesting of the plant influence its growth? Because I've heard that if you cut it down, it will shoot up from the below ground part, like more plants. So maybe if you have noticed any effects of harvesting.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think like once we harvest in April, for example, that's really had happened, or 2 things can happen. One is if the season is quite cold, the young shoots would be growing a bit slower because the older stems kind of create this sort of shelter for the young shoots, and also, I guess, some warmth. But if the season is really hot or warmer, like I think this season also is, like they're sprouting off quite quickly. But then what we do, so maybe I don't really have, I can also only share what kind of happened to our little site that we have now on Krater, the patch of land that is overgrown with knotweed, is that we're also harvesting the knotweed for their young shoots, because we make this burek pastry. So I have just harvested knotweed yesterday. So I think that also helps in a way to manage the growth, and somehow the patch of knotweed also doesn't spread. It kind of stays very fixed. So I think this might be also a solution if you're really quick and chop down the little sprouts, the little shoots, then the other ones that are growing afterwards are a bit less thick. But I think this doesn't, for example, work for the tree of heaven. It has a different kind of system.
How do these young shoots taste? Because I was just reading about this today, that a few like restaurants I think in New York are using them like asparagus or rhubarb. So I was just wondering how.
Yeah,
do you like them? Yeah.
They're having a rather specific taste. They're relatives to rhubarb, so they're very soury. Apparently they have a lot of vitamins and also this compound that boosts your immune system. And I think Alisa also knows quite a lot about that as well. But yeah, they would have this sort of a rooty, soury taste. So they're really nicely combined. So it's really nice if you combine them with, for example, eggs to make an omelette, or with apples to make an apple pie, apple Japanese knotweed pie. So if you're making some sweeter things, then it's nice to combine with the plant with some fruits, such as apples or strawberries. And then if you go on the savory, if you're on the savory side, for example, burek is a really nice, potato burek or cottage cheese burek is a really nice way to use the shoots. But I would almost never eat them just alone. Somehow they're too strong for me. You can also make a syrup.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah.
Maybe Alisa, you have a few things to share regarding that.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna also say that the rhizome, so they spread rhizomatically, like bamboo and other grasses. But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so there are scientists in England who are actually studying how to better eradicate Japanese knotweed, and they have found that just in the on the cellular level of Japanese knotweed, that there are growth hormones that are really in any part of the plant, which makes them so prolific, because even just a small portion of the rhizome or the shoot, going downstream from somewhere can kind of just take in the soil and spread. But just to address the spreading kind of question from the beginning, but lots of medicinal properties. There's resveratrol, which is high in the skins of grapes. That's a really potent antioxidant. So it's in high amounts in the roots and the rhizomes. So that comes up through the shoots a little bit in the springtime. And that's really the defense mechanism of the plant. So, light ultraviolet rays coming to the plant, and then the plant protecting themselves through antioxidant compounds, which we can consume. So yeah, pretty potent stuff.
And yeah, it can be used in such a variety of ways. Also, roots can be harvested as here also somebody observed, as well as herbal application or as dye. Some sort of orangey, yellowy dye we can create. It's quite a work intense process though, but it's a nice color.
Are there any other, I'm curious about all the, I mean, those Atlantis trees, the tree of heaven trees were just so giant. I mean, do you have wood reserves? And I mean, are you able to have other people make, I don't know. I mean, I guess you would need kind of a mill for that or something, but like, what's the extent of that project?
Maybe I'll answer. Actually, yeah, during that project, a lot of wood was collected, and really, I was before working with Trajna, I was having a woodworking carpentry. We were working with solid wood from Slovenia, and so I got to know different varieties during my practice. And when working with Tree of Heaven, I was really amazed how fast it grows, and really it can grow. Once I was working with a piece of wood which was like 50 or 60 centimeter wide. So also the tree was that big. So and still the quality of the wood is really, really good. One thing that's really, really not good with Tree of Heaven, it's really when you put it outside, it gets attacked by some fungi and or molds really, really fast. So, and that's why I was also thinking maybe that's why it has such a potent toxin in the external in the bark. In the bark, it's to protect this this wood that is really not good for external use. It's really with wet and with it really gets attacked really fast. But yeah, we had some funny and not funny complications with Tree of Heaven. Yeah. I think it was the Tree of Heaven, but yeah, I got poisoned with when we were like we had a project where we had to there was in the main park of Ljubljana there was a hill that was there is a forest which was damaged by strong winds, and there was a patch of trees that were just fall down, and in that part just the Tree of Heaven just got everywhere. So from like 100 square meters of damaged forest, we pulled out more than 230 sprouts and really young trees of Tree of Heaven. And yeah, one of that I got every time we did it there, I got some allergy. And yeah, the last time that when we got to take these sprouts out, I got really strong allergy reaction. I had to go to the hospital.
What was your reaction?
Actually, the first 3 times it got. I was just the next day. I was like, or having a lip. I had this lip inflammation, or urticaria in some parts, or like a swollen eye. But then the last time that we did it, I had this tremendous stomach ache, like gastroenteritis, and it was just yeah, it was really strong. It wasn't. It wasn't. I mean, now I really I don't want to scare people. So we were then also researching of the of this toxin, how we should also work with tree of heaven before that, and it was really 3 or 4 cases in the world where some people working with trees were just were allergic to the plant and got a stronger reaction. Otherwise, it's not. Nobody else got this reaction, and like we were working there like in 10 people every time there. So it was like, yeah.
Maybe it's cool to also say that we're always wearing masks. So at the beginning we were kind of laughing about it, but by the end I think we were all wearing masks when we were doing the work. But also what we found out in the scientific articles was that I think after a day, the toxins, which I think is called ilanthone, kind of decomposes and it's not active anymore, because they tried to use it for some sort of like a pesticide, yeah, like a natural pesticide, and then they figured out that this ilanthone is not active anymore, so this is not a good idea. So only while harvesting, it's kind of cool that you, if you will engage with it, it's cool that you wear the masks and take a bit more care how you do it.
Masks and gloves.
I wonder if it's I don't know, there's that some science behind.
There is a question in the chat, and we realized that it was actually happening. That when we were approaching the trees and started to take out the first trees, actually the air in that area got a really intense smell, and like it's not that you felt like poisoned by it, but it's
a bit.
There was you got like a irritation, really light irritation, like so people were coughing a bit, like. So it was a response to our action in that area.
But also there is this strategy of a mother tree. So if you would cut down the mother tree, the information will be passed and young shoots will start to grow. So that's why we were asked to kind of plug out the young shoots. And we started also to experiment with debarking the mother's trees, as that was some sort of a methodology how it can slowly start to die off. But we didn't really then continue this research anymore, because also Andrei got these problems and we just decided not to work with the tree for some time.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, actually. The defense mechanism of the tree sort of defending themselves.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Are there any other questions anyone would like to ask?
Maybe just like to which wood is the wood of tree of heaven most similar to, like of some of the better known species, for example, in Slovenia, the ones that are mostly used for carpentry and so on?
Maybe the acer, or I don't know how it's
maple.
Yeah, maple, and then yesen is. but it's similar in terms of how it looks, and it's I would say in terms of quality it's a bit below them. But on the outside, it's really below anything. It's really decomposes and gets attacked really fast. If it's used for interns, then it's I would say a bit less in terms of quality below maple, but still more than spur. Spreca jelka, it's
Bruce, I think.
Bruce.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But somehow in the end, we didn't decide to follow this production of beehives from the wood of Tree of Heaven, just because, as Andrei mentioned, the wood is not so good for outside conditions.
Well, should we wrap it up? Just wanted to thank anybody who's left for sticking around, and thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, I can't wait to
Thank
see.
everybody for listening to us.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what the designers and your collaboration will hold for
Yeah,
the remaining time.
we as well. And if you don't mind, I will just share with you maybe the open call if anyone is interested. Then this is the site where you can find more information.